chapter 9. I believe in your book it's on page 169. The second and third initiations. What is good about this book is that you immediately know that there are initiations, and God would not make those hurdles so high that we could not jump over them. So, knowing that there is a path, and that as we accelerate we are received, that the masters are watching over us, that their kindness, their presence is there, and when we are a piece of fruit that is ripened on the tree of life, that Maitreya or Sanat Kumara will pluck that fruit, one of the ascended masters, and they will simply say to us, come up higher. Just come up higher, take the next step. You don't have to take 1,000 steps, take the next step. I want you to know that this is an amaryllis presented to me this evening, and I've always thought all my life that an amaryllis is a person. I really have. There is such a presence of the caretaker of this plant that you cannot miss the precious gnome, the precious ones. And actually it only unfolded in the last 3 days. Isn't that wonderful? The second and third initiations, the first 3 fetters. Fetters. I realize we should keep a dictionary so everyone really knows what these words mean sometimes. Fetters are things that hold you back. The candidate who has passed the first initiation has entered definitely upon the path proper, the path that leads to adeptship, to the portal leading out of the human kingdom into that of the Superman. Do you remember the day when you picked up this book and for the first time you saw the Ascended Masters call themselves Supermen? I was wondering when they were going to call us Superwomen. But of course that was 1898. Looking at this path from below, one might wonder that the aspirant is not exhausted after his labors leading to the first initiation, that he does not shrink back by the dizzy heights that he sees rising before him on the relentless, ever-ascending path. But he has drunk at the fount of life, and his strength is as the strength of 10, because his heart is pure, and the glory of the ideal humanity, which he sees with ever-increasing clearness, has for him an attraction and inspiration with which no material stimulus or interest can ever compare. The first stage of his journey ends in the second initiation, to achieve which he must cast off 3 samyoyana, or fetters, which are the delusion of self, the delusion of self. When you write that down, leave the whole page clean so you can write in on that page. What are the delusions that I have about myself? Number 2, doubt or uncertainty. Doubt and uncertainty are killers. They're absolute killers of the soul. The third one is superstition. The first of these is the I am I consciousness, which as connected with a personality is nothing but an illusion and must be thrown aside at the very first step of the real upward path. But to cast off this fetter completely means even more than this, for it involves the realization of the fact that the individuality also is in very truth one with the all, that he can therefore never have any interests opposed to those of his brethren, and that he is most truly progressing when he most assists the progress of others. See in others the mirror of yourself, then care for the one you see. As to the second fetter, a word of caution is necessary. People who have been trained in Western habits of thought are unhappily so familiar with the idea that a blind, unreasoning adhesion to certain dogmas may be claimed from a disciple of any religion, school, or sect, that on hearing that in occultism, doubt is considered to be an obstacle to progress. They are likely to suppose that this path also requires from its followers the same unquestioning faith as do many modern superstitions. No idea could be more entirely false. It is true that doubt, or rather uncertainty, on some questions is a bar to spiritual progress, but the antidote to that doubt is not blind faith, which is itself considered a fetter, as will presently be seen, but the certainty of conviction founded on individual experience or mathematical reasoning. While a child doubts the accuracy of the multiplication table, he can hardly acquire proficiency in the higher mathematics, but his doubts can be satisfactorily cleared up only by his attaining a comprehension founded on reasoning or experiment that the statements contained in the table are true. He believes that twice 2 are 4, not merely because he has been told so, but because it has become to him a self-evident fact. And this is exactly the method, and the only method, of resolving doubt known to occultism. Experiment, prove, and finally accept. Let us take up doubt or uncertainty. Doubt or uncertainty has been defined as doubt of the doctrines of karma and reincarnation, and of the efficacy of the method of attaining the highest good by this path of holiness. But the knowledge of these things also brings with it a vivid realization that the world is God's school for man, and that his plan is the evolution of the immortal life through the perishing forms, and is wonderful and beneficent in every part. As he casts off his second fetter, the initiate arrives at absolute certainty, based either upon personal first-hand knowledge or upon reason, that the occult teaching upon these points is true. The third fetter, superstition, has been described as including all kinds of unreasoning and mistaken belief, and all dependence upon outward rites and ceremonies to purify the heart. He sees that all the methods of help offered to us by the great religions, prayers, sacraments, pilgrimages, fastings, and the observation of manifold rites and ceremonies are helps and no more, that the wise man will adopt such of them as he finds useful to him, but will never trust to any of them alone. The man who has cast off this fetter realizes that there is no one form of religion which is a necessity for all men, but that through any and all alike, and even outside of them, the path to the highest may be found. These three fetters are in a coherent series. The difference between individuality and personality being fully understood, it is then possible to some extent to appreciate the actual course of reincarnation, and so to dispel all doubt on that head. This done, the knowledge of the spiritual permanence of the true ego brings reliance on one's own spiritual strength, and so dispels superstition. Subdivisions of the steps. Each stage of the path proper is divided into 4 steps. The first is its mago, or way, during which the student is striving to cast off the fetters. The second is its phala, literally fruit or result, when the man finds the result of his efforts showing themselves more and more. Thirdly comes its bhavaga, or consummation, the period when, the result having culminated, he is able to fulfill satisfactorily the work belonging to the step on which he now firmly stands. The fourth is its gotrabu, which means the time when he has arrived at a fit state to receive the next initiation. That the candidate may become gotrabu, we see that complete and entire freedom from the fetters of his stage on the path is absolutely essential. Before the man can proceed to the second initiation, the initiator chosen by the king demands evidence as to how the candidate has used the powers acquired by him at the first initiation. And one of the most beautiful features of the ceremony is the part when those who have been helped by the candidate come forward to give their testimony. It is also requisite for this initiation that the candidate shall have developed the power to function freely in his mental body. For although the ceremony of the first initiation is held on the astral plane, that of the second takes place in the lower mental world. It may seem difficult to reconcile that statement with the fact that the initiations are described as occurring in a certain hall or garden, but really there is no discrepancy. If the Lord Maitreya acts as initiator, the ceremony is usually performed either in his garden or in his great room. He himself is present in his physical body, and so in many cases is the Lord Vevasvata Manu, who lives close by. All others present are usually in the astral vehicle in the case of the first initiation, but in the mental body in the case of the second. The great ones present focus their consciousness with perfect ease at whatever level is required. But there is, of course, on the astral and the mental planes, a perfect counterpart of everything on the physical. And so the accounts given are perfectly correct, and the positions taken up in relation to physical objects are just as there described. Mental development. The second initiation rapidly continues the development of the mental body, and at or near this point, the pupil learns to use the Mayavi Rupa, which is sometimes translated as the body of illusion. This is a temporary astral body made by one who is able to function in his mental body. When a man travels to the astral plane, he usually does so in the astral body. And if it were necessary for him to show himself on the physical plane while he was functioning in his astral body, he would have to materialize a physical body round it. This is sometimes done, though not frequently, because it involves a great expenditure of force. Similarly, if he were working in his mental body and desired to manifest himself on the astral plane, he would need to materialize a temporary astral body, which is the Mayavi Rupa. When he had finished his work, he would withdraw to the mental plane once more, and the temporary body would vanish, its materials returning to the general circulation of astral matter whence they had been drawn up by the pupil's will. Up to the time of the first initiation, the man who works at night in his astral body. But as soon as it is perfectly under control and he is able to use it fully, work in the mental body is begun. When that body, in turn, is completely organized, it is a far more flexible vehicle than the astral body, and much that is impossible on the astral plane can be accomplished therein. With the power to form the Mayavi Rupa, the man is able to pass instantly from the mental plane to the astral and back, and to use at all times the greater power and keener sense of the mental plane, and it is only necessary to form the astral materialization when he wants to become visible to people in the astral world. It is necessary that the master shall first show his pupil how to make the Mayavi Rupa, after which, although it is not at first an easy matter, he can do it for himself. A very great expansion and development of the mental body takes place in connection with this second initiation, but it is usually some years before the effects of this can show themselves in the physical brain. As they begin to do so, they unquestionably put a great strain upon that brain, as it cannot be instantaneously tuned to the necessary pitch. The danger point. The period after the taking of the second initiation is in many ways the most dangerous on the path, although at any point until the fifth initiation is passed, there is the possibility of falling back or of spending many incarnations wandering about. But it is at this stage especially that if there is any weakness in a candidate's character, it will show itself. It should be impossible for a man who has raised himself to this height to fall back, but unfortunately experience has shown us that even this does sometimes happen. In nearly all cases, the danger comes through pride. If there is the least tinge of pride in the man's nature, he is in serious risk of a fall. What we talk about down here as intellect is the merest reflection of the real thing, yet some of us are proud of that, proud of our intellect and insight. So when a man gets even a remote glimpse of what his intellect is going to be in the future, there is serious danger, and if he once starts on that line, he will have a terribly hard time getting back again. Nothing but unceasing and increasing vigilance can enable him to pass through this stage successfully, and it must be his constant endeavor to kill out every trace of pride, selfishness, and prejudice. Now we well remember our last Darshan and how many of you came forward and talked about experiences of pride. So this teaches us that we cannot succeed in our initiations if we do not kill out every trace of pride, selfishness, and prejudice. So we understand that there are waymarks on the path, perhaps trees that are lined along a long avenue. Somehow we must push through, strip ourselves of the unreality of pride, and come to that profound realization of the humility of our Lord Christ Jesus, who was humble at the same time that he was strong. Pride in itself takes us off the path, and as this book is saying, it takes a long time to get back again. So read this sentence again. Nothing but unceasing and increasing vigilance can enable him to pass through this stage successfully, and it must be his constant endeavor to kill out every trace of pride, selfishness, and prejudice. To me, the most helpful statement about pride always is, I of mine own self can do nothing. It is the Father in me that doeth the work. As you know, Jesus gave that statement to Catherine of Siena. I the all, thou the nothing. As I have observed my life in this lifetime, I have always been so much aware that I am not the doer, I'm hardly the instrument, and that I truly can do nothing. The only thing that I can do is to be self-emptied so that God can move in me and work through me. Pride is a disease. Know it now. Pride is a disease. It's a profound disease. It goes along with selfishness and prejudice. But we are not going to get to that place of the ascension without binding it, without waging war against it. When we know these things from behind, we find sudden and curious illumination thrown upon various texts of the Bible. This danger point in the life of the initiate is indicated in the gospel story by the temptation in the wilderness which followed the baptism of Christ by John. The 40 days in the wilderness symbolize the period during which the expansion of the mental body given in the second initiation is being worked down into the physical brain, though for the ordinary candidate, not 40 days, but 40 years might well be required for its accomplishment. In the life of Jesus, it was the period when his brain was being adapted to the incoming Christ. It's wonderful to have this teaching that we do not have in our Western Bible. Then the devil, who in the symbolism represents the lower nature, comes to tempt the initiate, first to use his powers for the satisfaction of his own needs. If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. Then he is tempted to cast himself down from a pinnacle of the temple, thus performing a miracle which would astound the populace. And lastly, he is shown all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. And the devil says, all these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. He is tempted to use his powers to gratify his own ambition. Each of these temptations represents a different form of pride. El Morya says, one of the greatest ways to overcome pride is to perform a task that you think is beneath you. Just try it. Just go and do it. You don't need any bravado. You don't need anybody saying how wonderful you are. Do something that you think is too lowly for you, and then walk that path of the lowly. Just as the first great initiation corresponds to a new birth, so may the second initiation be justly compared to the baptism of the Holy Ghost and of fire. For it is the power of the third person of the Blessed Trinity that is outpoured at that moment, descending in what may be inadequately described as a flood of fire, a flaming tide of living light. The man at this stage is spoken of among the Buddhists as a Sakadagamin, the man who returns but once, which means that he who has reached that level should need but one more incarnation before attaining arhatship, the fourth initiation, after which there is no compulsory physical rebirth. The Hindu name for this second step is the Kutachaka. The Kutachaka, the man who builds a hut, he who has reached a place of peace. At this stage, no additional fetters are cast off, but it is usually a period of considerable psychic and intellectual advancement. If what are commonly called psychic faculties have not been previously acquired, it is the tradition that they should be developed at this stage, as without them it would seem practically impossible to assimilate the knowledge which must now be given, or to do the higher work for humanity in which the initiate is now privileged to assist. He must have the astral consciousness at his command during his physical waking life, and during sleep the heaven world will be open before him. For the consciousness of a man, when away from his physical body, is always one stage higher than it is while he is still burdened with the house of flesh. Dr. Besant, however, in her initiation, The Perfecting of Man, supplies us with an alternative interpretation of this. She says that before a man can come to the third initiation, he must learn to bring the spirit of intuition, buddhi, down to his physical consciousness so that it may abide in him and guide him. Then she adds, the process is usually called the development of psychic faculties, and it is so in the true meaning of the word psychic. But it does not mean the development of clairvoyance and clairaudience, which depend on a different process. When the candidate has passed through the 4 sub-stages of the second initiation and has once more become Gotrabu, he is ready for the third initiation to become the Anagamin, which means literally, he who does not return, for it is expected of him that he will attain the next initiation in the same incarnation. The Hindu names for this stage is the Hamsa, which means a swan, but the word is also considered to be a form of the sentence, Soham, that am I. There is a tradition, too, that the swan is able to separate milk from water, and the sage is similarly able to realize the true value for living beings of the phenomena of life. This initiation is typified in the Christian symbolism by the transfiguration of the Christ. He went up into an high mountain apart and was transfigured before his disciples. His face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as light, exceeding white as snow, so as no fuller on earth can white them. This description suggests the Algoides, the glorified man, and it is no inaccurate picture of what happens at this initiation, for just as the second initiation is principally concerned with the quickening of the lower mental body, so at this stage the causal body is especially developed. The ego is brought more closely into touch with the monad and is thus transfigured in very truth. Even the personality is affected by that wondrous outpouring. The higher and the lower self became one at the first initiation, and that unity is never lost. But the development of the higher self that now takes place can never be mirrored in the lower worlds of form, although the two are one to the greatest possible extent. The gospel story tells also that at the transfiguration there appeared Moses and Elijah, the chief figures of the old dispensation. One the greatest of the Jewish prophets, the other representing the Jewish law. Thus the two dispensations or methods of approach to truth, that of the following of the law and that of the inspiration of prophecy, are represented as with him who was about to establish a new dispensation, that of the gospel. And all these symbols have meanings referring to the actual facts of the third initiation. Another symbol relating to the same step appears in the gospel story of the presentation of the Christ to his Father in the temple. In the traditional account, this is somewhat out of place, for the Christ is then presented as a little child. At this stage of the man's progress, he has to be brought before the spiritual king of the world, the mighty head of the occult hierarchy, who at this third step either confers the initiation himself or deputes one of his pupils. The three lords of the flame who came with him from Venus to do so, and in the latter event the man is presented to the king soon after the initiation has taken place. Thus the Christ is brought into the presence of his Father. The buddhi in the initiate is raised until it becomes one with its origin on the nirvanic plane, and a very wonderful union between the first and the second principles in man is then effected. The fourth and fifth fetters. The anagamin enjoys, while moving through the round of his daily work, all the splendid possibilities given by the full possession of the faculties of the higher mental plane. And when he leaves his physical vehicle at night, he enters once more into the wonderfully widened consciousness that belongs to the Buddhic plane. While in this state, he has to throw off any lingering remains of what are called the fourth and fifth fetters, kamaraga and patiga, attachment to the enjoyment of sensation, typified by earthly love and all possibility of anger or hatred. The aspirant must free himself from the possibility of being enslaved in any way by external things. It is not by any means that he will not feel the attraction of what is pleasant or beautiful or clean, nor the repulsion for the opposites of these things. He will still take them into account in the course of his work, but he will not let them be a deciding element in duty, and will override them entirely on those emergent occasions when it is necessary for his work. Here we must guard against a possible misconception, one with which we frequently meet. The purest and noblest human love never dies away, is never in any way diminished by occult training. On the contrary, it is increased and widened until it embraces all with the same degree of fervor which at first was lavished on one or two only. But the student does in time rise above all considerations connected with a mere personality of those around him, and so is free from all the injustice and partiality which ordinary love so often brings in its train. As I have observed people in life and watched the interchanges of human love and the great intensity of this love, and yet I've watched such people then come forth and have the greatest hatred, the greatest anger, the greatest darkness that they have put upon others. When we see that, we know that these people have only reached a certain level of human love. If they had reached the level of divine love, they wouldn't hate anyone. It's very strange how people can love someone so greatly and hate someone else so terribly. Nor should it for a moment be supposed that in gaining this wide affection for all, he loses the especial love for his closer friends. The unusually perfect link between Ananda and the Lord Buddha, as between St. John and the Christ, is on record to prove that, on the contrary, this is enormously intensified, and the tie between a master and his pupils is far stronger than any earthly bond. For the affection which flourishes upon the path of holiness is an affection between egos, not merely between personalities. Therefore it is strong and permanent, without fear of diminution or fluctuation, for it is that perfect love which casteth out fear. At this point, we would like to take some simple mantras. Karanjit will lead us.
Before we begin, if you could just take a few deep breaths, and as you let your breath go, you can watch how your emotions settle down and the ripples of thought in your mind, they die out, and then we can begin the mantra and some basic teaching on it. Okay, the first mantra is Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. I'm going to first say it a few times and then I will explain the meaning behind it. Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. Want to join in on the next one? Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. 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 Om Shri Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. Om. So the mantra is Om, which we know is the primordial syllable, the seed syllable of the universe. And the word Shri has two meanings. The first meaning is Shri is a sign of great respect for the being whose name you're about to say. It means something like the word holy, but very divine holiness. That's the one meaning of the word Shri. The second meaning of the word Shri is it's also a name for Lakshmi. Lakshmi, as you know, is the divine complement of the second person of the Hindu Trinity, which is Lord Vishnu. And so what you're saying is the being which follows is also a manifestation of this mother quality which Lakshmi represents, is also a manifestation of the Divine Mother. Now when you say Krishna, that's his name, Krishna Ye means I am of Krishna. If you read the Mahabharata and you watch any of those videos, which by the way are smaller in number than the Ramayana, they're only 24 videos. If you watch those videos, there are many occasions when Lord Krishna turns to his favorite disciple, Draupadi, and calls that disciple Krishna, which means you are of me. So what we are saying is when you say Om Shri Krishna E, it means I am an emanation of that being, which in this case is Krishna. I am an extension of that being. I am a son of that being. I am a daughter of that being. I am Krishna's. I belong to Krishna. And Namaha is a salutation, and it also in this context means you are in some ways assuming the identity, a divine identity of that being whom you are invoking. The second one is something which I'd wanted to do, and I asked Mother if it would be okay to say Moria's name, because the meaning would then become I am an extension of Moria, I belong to Moria, I'm an emanation of Moria, I'm a son of Moria, I'm a daughter of Moria, I am Moria's. So it has all those meanings and connotations. So let's take this one up. Om Shri Moryaye Namaha. 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 Om. The next one is I am an extension of God Surya. I'm an emanation of Surya. It has all the meanings which I described in the first two, giving of those mantras. Let's take a deep breath. Om Shri Suryaye Namaha. Om Shri Suryaye Namaha. Om Shri Suryaye Namaha. Om Shri Om Shri Suryaye Namaha. Om Shri Om Shri Suryaye Namaha. Om Shri Om Shri Om Shri Suryaye Namaha. Om Shri Suryaye Namaha. Om Shri Suryaye Namaha. Om. It's very important in giving these mantras that they're given, first of all, the ones we are given have been given slowly. And one reason is that you can pause between them and then take your breath. It's very important to have a proper breathing action before releasing the mantra. There is a short episode from one of my favorite scriptures in the East, which is the Ramayana, which I would like to read to you, which talks about the delivery of the mantra. This is a story, as you know, of the seventh incarnation of Vishnu, and the Vishnu came into embodiment to defeat King Ravan, who was might say at the time, he was a great adept at one time, but fell on the point of pride. And a war takes place between Lord Ram and Ravana in Sri Lanka. And this is a small description of the type of warfare which takes place and the mantrams which were invoked. So here's the small description. Ravana then shot an astra called Thama. Astra is a divine weapon which is charged by mantra, whose nature was to create total darkness in all the worlds. The arrows came with heads exposing frightening eyes and fangs and fiery tongues. End to end, the earth was enveloped in total darkness, and the whole of creation was paralyzed. This astra also created a deluge of rain on one side, a rain of stones on the other, a hailstorm showering down intermittently, and a tornado sweeping the earth. Ravan was sure that this would arrest Ram's enterprise, but Ram was able to meet it with what was named Shiv Astra, that's the weapon of Lord Shiva, charged with the mantra to Shiva. He understood the nature of the phenomenon and the cause of it and chose the appropriate astra for counteracting it. Ravan now shot off what he considered his deadliest weapon, a trident endowed with extraordinary destructive power, once gifted to Ravan by the gods. When it started on its journey, there was real panic all around. It came on flaming toward Ram, its speed, of course, unaffected by the arrows he flung at it. When Ram noticed his arrows falling down ineffectively, while the trident sailed towards him, for a moment he lost heart. When it came quite near, he uttered a certain mantra from the depth of his being, and while he was breathing out that incantation, an esoteric syllable in perfect timing, the trident collapsed. Ravan, who had been so certain of vanquishing Ram with his trident, was astonished to see it fall down within an inch of him, and for a minute wondered if his adversary might not after all be a divine being, although he looked like a mortal. Ravan thought to himself, "This is perhaps the highest god. Who could it be? Not Shiva, for Shiva is my supporter. He could not be Brahma, who is four-faced, could not be Vishnu, because of my immunity from the weapons of the whole Trinity. Perhaps this man is a primordial being, the cause behind the universe. But whoever he may be, I will not stop my fight until I defeat and crush him, or at least take him prisoner." So Ravan, of course, loses, but the sentence here, which was that an esoteric syllable in perfect timing, which caused the trident to collapse. So it shows you the power of giving the mantra properly with proper breath action. Illustrates that.
Thank you. Very, very good. I would like to give you the opportunity to witness to the power of God in your life, to be able to vanquish absolute evil. Not everyone has faced absolute God and absolute evil, but it is there. So any other experience you'd like to talk about is also just fine. This is like Wednesday night service at the Christian Science Church in my hometown. The reader, as the person is called, stands at the pulpit. The church is quite plain, as most Protestant churches are. Many of them are painted, the walls painted pink, with sayings of Jesus. And so the reader stands there, and all is silent, and then someone stands up and gives his testimony. If God has helped you during that period of that week, it is up to you to proclaim him and to honor him and to tell the people that he has healed you or given you resolution or whatever it might be. So it's important to acknowledge that God has been good to us.
Good evening, Mother. I have to tell you that, just a second. This kind of relates to my story, what it is. Rio Light has really helped me, and I know I'm nowhere near fearless yet. Even 2 years ago, I would have not dared standing up here and talking to you. So, anyways, July 1985, Rio Light gave a dictation, and he said in his dictation that, if we had fear, we could come to the retreat of the Divine Mother and join his legions and train with them to get that fearlessness flame. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, that's for me, because, I've always been really scared in the dark, and I've always been scared of standing in front of people and speaking, and things like that. So, for a number of months, I can't remember how long, but it was a long time, like 6 months to a year. Every night I went to the retreat of the Divine Mother and, made that call to join the Legions of Real Light and to, train with them. And I definitely saw improvement, even though, I'm not doing that great yet, but, I definitely saw improvement. And the reason why is last year I went back to my parents' home in Canada, and I had to stay by myself in the house for 2 weeks. And that was like the scariest thing, because, at dark at night, I used to not even dare to stay by myself in the house, especially since we at one time got broken into in Holland. So I would always, lock the door behind me, turn on all the lights, and go through the whole house and make sure there was nothing weird there. But, when I stayed last year by myself, it actually, it wasn't anything scary anymore. And I didn't have that feeling that, something was going to creep up on me. And because, I even if I did my protection calls, I would, you still used to have that feeling. And last year I didn't have that anymore, and I was just so grateful, and I knew it was because I went to Rayo Light's retreat and trained with him. So I still go there periodically because I still have other things to work on, I know. And speaking is one of them. But I just wanted to witness that if you do have fears of any kind, please remember that dispensation, because it's a great dispensation. It really is. And so that's all.
Do you know the words to it?
I don't. I did print it out. I can get it because it's on the computer here in Ulm. If you want to, I will get it and read it.
That's good. Why don't you come back and read it to us?
Okay.
So now we have from San Francisco study group, and this is regarding gossip and criticism, condemnation, and judgment. I believe it would be very helpful to all of us if you could issue a definition of gossip and criticism. As I said earlier, I think it would be good to have a dictionary. Dictionaries are very revealing. Gossip is conversation that is unseemly, that pains another, that may be entirely untrue. Gossip takes energy and the sacred fire, and when you commit gossip, you immediately commit karma. Gossip is vicious. It can even become as vicious as voodoo and the black arts. It can destroy people's livelihood. It can destroy their reputation. You take, for instance, my situation of being a public figure. I cannot answer the evil that is said of me or the gossip that is spoken of me. So I always walk with Jesus. What is that to thee? Follow thou me. I'm not going to change people anyway. Gossip is something that we must control. And if we've been gossiping for thousands of years, we may have many gossip entities around us, sapping our strength, pulling apart our seamless garment, and it becomes an addiction as bad as the addictions of criticism, condemnation, and judgment. So you who on the patches, or you who are here, if you are asking me to define condemnation and judgment, etc., let's all bring our dictionaries, even a pocket dictionary, to Darshan, so we all know what we're talking about. Criticism, condemnation, and judgment are much alike. Judgment means you pass judgment upon another. And Jesus said, with what measure ye mete, it shall be meted unto you. And he also said, judge not, lest ye be judged. It's impossible to judge anyone. It's absolutely impossible for you to judge anyone. We do not know the heart, the soul, the mind, the burden, the karma, the weight that a person is carrying. So how can we pass judgment? This person might be 5 hours from their deathbed. This person might be so ill. This person might be partly insane. I mean, you cannot look at a person and read them accurately because they are changing at all times. It's not necessary to judge because God is our judge, and he does judge us, and he does judge us through letting our karma descend. To condemn others, condemnation to me is to curse another. When you condemn someone, it's like condemning them to death. It is a curse you put on people. When you criticize, you're tearing them apart. Because why? Why do you tear people apart? It's because you are insecure. You are not content to concentrate on the wholeness of your own being. But you have to know that everyone else is lesser than you. Everyone else is beneath you. And many people are simply not happy unless they know that everyone they know is beneath them. Not as smart as they are, not as this, not as that, not as wealthy, and so forth. I would suggest that you look at the Sermon on the Mount, beginning with Matthew 5, and read through it, because Jesus has all of this teaching in those very verses. The masters have repeatedly instructed that these must cease, yet they continue. The reason that gossip and criticism, condemnation, and judgment continue is because they grow. They grow like a cancer. And they become habitual. They are so habit-forming that people open their mouths and start committing this crime of gossip, criticism, condemnation, and judgment. So, proportionate to the many times in this and all previous lives that you have put this upon people, so you have to antidote it with a violet flame, with the power of forgiveness, with the power of your mighty I Am presence, and absolutely stop it. It takes willpower and it takes profound humility to go to the altar of God, call to the Holy Spirit, for all who are bowed down on earth today, whom in this life or another life you have put down. This person is talking about, we're not clear about definitions. Please use your dictionaries when phoning in. Then this goes on, gossip. Some people may think that the term only encompasses talk that is maligning or damaging. My understanding is that it includes most idle conversation about anyone else. Well, I think gossip may be idle conversation, but it has a certain sting in it. When you gossip about people, you are laying a trip on them and not knowing what their burdens are. Criticism isn't justified because we can always help people positively. We can give them a positive answer. And so we don't need to criticize someone's work because everyone who is on the path or not on the path has good in him. And so when you're about to meet someone or see them, or you see them coming down the way, already be thinking, what is the most wonderful thing I know about this person? And when I think about it, the smile is already on my face because now I'm so happy that I can tell this person how wonderful they are, how beautiful they are, how sweet they are, how much good service they've done for us. There's so many wonderful things that you can say to people. So why should it ever be justified? There's no justification for criticism. You accentuate the good. I think that you should go to the dictionary, as I said earlier, and really probe the definitions and decide how you would like to be treated in life and treat others in this manner. It takes care of the whole law: gossip, criticism, condemnation, and judgment. So we'll take the next person.
Good evening, Mother. I had a question in my mind this afternoon, and then when she brought it up, it's exactly the same thing. Oh, I've forgotten to thank you also greatly for your advice before my trip to Venezuela. It worked like a charm. My mother and I had never had a more loving relationship ever before. And I really want to
That's really wonderful.
thank you for that.
The power of love is tremendous, isn't it?
I realized that a lot of what was going on with me, I wasn't being as loving. And for the first time, I saw the beauty of her soul and all of the gratitude that you should have for your mother. It's no end to that. I had a question about terror and fear and maybe records of death. Since a very young child, I have always lived in a great deal of fear, of darkness, and I've had a great deal of imagination where my imagination would run rampant and things would become very concrete. And things that most children would normally be able to handle. I was even afraid to watch, there was a show called The Addams Show. If I ever even watched any.
It was a pretty bad show.
It was a terrible show, but other kids could handle it. I would have nightmares that night. I remember one time looking at a little comic strip that was called Cemetery or something, and it had like skeletons and tombs and all these things. And that night, my mother wanted me to learn to sleep in the dark, to be alone, and I was hysterical. I was seeing all the images and the bunk bed above me, and blankets that were folded around in the darkness were looking like skeletons. And I always had this fear, and it took me a long time, even as a teenager. Little by little, I was able to sleep alone in a room, then gradually with the lights off, and then gradually to the point where I was an adult. At one point, I was able to be by myself in an apartment, but I just never understand why all this fear. On the way back from ranch office here, I started having fear.
Well,
Then
let's talk about fear as being in the body. Now, diet has a lot to do with whether you are at peace or whether you have fear. Fear is agitation. Agitation can be acidic condition in the body. So say you have an acidic condition and you go to sleep with like an acid stomach. You may have nightmares because just of that acidity. So we have to realize that our body chemistry has a great deal to do with whether we are comfortable in the body, whether we feel strong, we feel at peace. And so I think we always have to come back to what are we eating, what are we thinking, what are we saying. So I think that if we get too extreme in hot spicy food and in a hot climate, and then we go to the other end of the spectrum of living as we live here, foods definitely contribute to the state of the mind and the state of the emotions. If you don't want to get upset, then don't take in sugar,
Meat.
for instance. If anyone gets upset, there are substances that within an hour can have you so off base. I mean, if you look at it now, look at teen suicide. Why are they committing suicide? Is it just because their parents work? No, that's not why. It's what they're eating. It's the chemicals in the food that they eat that literally changes the mind. So start close to home when you're looking at imbalances in your life. Start looking at what are you putting in. Take the next person.
Thank you, Mother.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mother. Hi, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the power of Lanello in my life because I feel that 1973 was the greatest turning point in my entire life, and I see so many changes that happened then. And I felt it was almost like a new life began. And the first thing that I think that happened was that I walked out of my family's church one day and I knew I would never be back there.
What church was it?
The Anglican church. And I was very sad about it because I thought that I was the wrong one, but it was really the beginning of the search. And the next thing that happened was my diet started to change. I started to eat less meat, and I decided that I would systematically cut out white sugar. And various other things happened that, for instance, I started up martial arts, which I found really gave me a sense of discipline and alignment. So I really feel that the Lanello all the way, Lanello has guided me, helped me, and really gone before me. And especially when I came on staff in June of '96, I felt such a welcome and such a love of the community. I felt almost as if it was Lanello's heart welcoming me here. So I'd like to thank the staff and Mother, and I'm very grateful to be here.
You know, Mark changed his diet drastically after I met him. He thought he was going to live only 3 years. He lived 12 years. If he hadn't lived those 12 years, I wouldn't have 4 children by him. But he definitely changed his diet and prolonged his life. And he was doing that at the same time, 1973, when you felt impelled to do that.
Oh, that's amazing.
He was interested in the martial arts. At that time, we had a sauna for people who've been taking a lot of drugs. We worked on that equation because so many of them came to us. So as you look at Lanello's pictures, as people always remark, he looks the youngest on the day of his ascension. And this was taken, let's see, I was pregnant with my second child. So it was about 10 years earlier.
I really found that when I was doing the martial arts, I only did it for a very short time because I got back into music. But I found that my mind has never been so clear when I was really exercising and doing the martial arts, and it was really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
My mother. It seems that I've lived through about 5 embodiments so far. I've never really publicly given glory to God for all the times that I should have been dead. So I think I'll do it now.
While you can.
Do
it while you can.
Yes. It's like, I feel like the hound of heaven has been after me, and the hound of heaven has actually been a watchdog, because the first time was that I can remember is I was on a kind of a caravan trip through New Mexico and Utah and Colorado, and at one point at night, the people I was with, we decided to camp, to stop on top of a very high butte. And we saw when we were up there, it was near sundown, about 4 lightning storms in all different directions. And after a while, we noticed that they were all coming towards us. And I turned to one of the people that I was with and said, this looks pretty dangerous. Maybe we ought to get off of the top of this thing. I mean, needles usually attract lightning, that kind of thing. Like there were just nothing but a lightning rod up here, and we're right at the tip of it. He says, oh no, we'll just be fine. So these lightning storms all did converge on us. And I don't know I'm sure everybody in the room has experienced lightning close to them, but this is really ridiculous. This was not just lightning, this was sheet lightning, where you have networks of lightning coming down from all different directions. And we had tents that we were in. I spent the entire night with my hands outside the tent trying to hold it down, and with these huge rocks all around it. And me and the person that were inside of it were looking at each other when the lightning would go off, with our hairs totally standing out on end, I mean, it was quite amazing. And I'm not kidding, like hours after hour, it was just pounding and pounding on us. We got up in the morning and just kind of looked at each other and realized that, we must all have some sort of a mission, for God. Somebody wants us alive, because just hundreds of strikes happened that night. The second time was, I used to be a biker. Do I look like a Hell's Angel? Maybe I was a Heaven's Angel. Well, anyway, this was when I was in college. I was in Rochester, New York, and there's a street called Lake Avenue, and it goes like like an arrow all the way from the center of the city all the way out to Lake Ontario. So this friend of mine who was in fact a biker from New York wanted to just go out to the lake, so we said fine. So we got on. I was on my little 160 Honda, and he was on the back of it. And we go out there, and when you get out near Lake Ontario, it's very, very dark. There's no real street lights. It's very rural. And we're doing about 60 miles an hour, and I didn't realize that when you get to the lake, the road goes to a T intersection, meaning the road ends. And so we left the road at about 60 miles an hour. And I mean, you've seen people ski jumping. Well, we did it on a motorcycle. And we came down on a absolutely perfect 2-point landing. It's just the wheels just absolutely perfect. We rolled to a stop and maybe 100 feet farther in, from when we hit the ground. And again, I keep looking at people like this. We look at each other and wonder why we're still alive. And then this guy, to prove just what kind of a nut I had on the back of my motorcycle, he says, what do you think he says? He says, let's do it again. Right. So that was number 2. The third one was I lived in New Mexico, and I was I lived at the bottom of some fairly high mountains, right at their base. And one night I wanted to go for a hike, and I didn't take any coat or anything like that. I had about 5 dogs there in this place where I was living. They weren't all mine, and we would go for hikes a lot. Well, me and all these dogs went up to the top of the mountains, and to see the sunset, kind of. And it was so beautiful that I decided I was going to just keep on going down the mountain range and then make a big, big circle and then come back home. Well, in New Mexico, it gets extremely cold at night. And by the time I got about halfway across the mountain, I had reached the point of no return. And it was dark, essentially. So I came down the mountain with all these dogs and started walking across a plain to where I knew where I could get back to the road. And while I was walking across this plain, you go fairly long distances in New Mexico sometimes, of very, very sameness in country. And so I was just walking across this flat, and you can get kind of almost hypnotized because it's just kind of like endless walking, and everything is exactly the same. And the next step that I was about to take was going at this particular point, and against it's almost pitch black, just starlight out. I looked down, and what I was about to step into was approximately 30 to 40 feet sheer wall. Essentially, it was an abandoned kiva. And a kiva is a place where Indians, in Pueblo Indians, have their religious ceremonies, and it's dug into the ground, and the walls are perfectly vertical, and they go in with a ladder or whatever, but this one was just right in the middle of this field. There's no way of anybody knowing it was there. And it was essentially one more step, and I would have just fallen in there, and I was totally alone. There's no way anybody would have found me. So I was quite amazed that some still small voice in me said, "Look where you're about to step." Another one is I was on another hike, and I was reaching up for, you've seen that we actually have a rock like this on Mulherron Creek Road. It looks like if in the next rainstorm you're going to have about 20 tons of boulder coming across the road. There's one as you're going up there. Well, this one wasn't exactly like that. It looked absolutely safe. But I just lifted myself up on it because I was coming up over a little kind of a cliff. And half the cliff starts moving, coming down on me. But it didn't. And I just thought to myself, could have, but it didn't. It was just really quite amazing. Another time I was, I've always read about people hiking in the mountains, and if your karma's bad, you die. Just simple as that. And people trying to find the master, going in the mountains, and if they find him, they find him. If they don't, they die. Well, I was in Mexico this time. I was hitchhiking throughout Mexico. And I was with a friend who was taking me to visit some Indians in the Sierras. And we got to this village where they lived. We hiked in for about 2 days into the mountains and stayed with them for a little less than a week, I guess. And then for some reason, I decided I wanted to go home at that time, and he didn't. He wanted to go farther in and go to a hot spring that they had told us about. So I left him and started back myself. And when I got halfway down the mountain the next day, this was during daylight, I came to a clearing, and kind of was bull in a china shop style of hiking. I was just kind of just going down the mountain real fast, and I just kind of sat down and took a rest. And I look up, and the next step that I would have taken would have been going into a wasp nest that was about this big, by about like this, one of those big paper wasp nests. And it just so happened, that there weren't any wasps in it. It was an abandoned one. But again, I realized this is ridiculous. I could have. I'm really glad I'm still alive. So that was about 5 of them. I don't know if I can remember any more, but definitely have some divine protection way beyond what I consciously invoked. And I also read that pearl in 1985 from Rayolite, and I've really been very enthralled with Rayolite's energy, with that green and white flame. It gives me a lot of verve and vibrancy. And I don't know if you want to hear it, but I wrote a decree to Rayolite based upon the concepts in that pearl. So if you'd like to hear it, I will do it. It's a very fun decree. It's almost like a marching song. It goes. In Rayolite's name, I am calling to claim, piercing bolts of the lightning of fearlessness flame. Purity's rays tinged with emerald hue, reveal unreality, shatter it too. O God, O fearlessness flame, bless and reign, dissolve all now fear that would cover my frame. Legions of Rayolite, I now command, come o'er love's bridge now, expand Buddha land. I am God's grail, his chalice pure, for fearlessness flame in me does endure. All hail, great teams of conquerors, charged by victory's flame I am at large. Enfolding life and being all, God's grace flows through my temple hall. Pierce, pierce, pierce through by emerald hue, divine and crystal light, my life is thine. O cosmos, march and step right through, bring harmony in all I do. Reflect love's portion, now make whole, thy cord of gold thread through my soul. Come hold each facet in its place, that I might see thee face to face. I am in Christ, come in a cloud, communing with thee, burning shrouds. All death like Maya I address, begone from me is my request. And if you tarry, I'll run you through with Michael's sword, astray as two. There's still a little bit more.
You deserve that applause at that point.
I'm moving and proving in the flame that sings, in the fearlessest flame that furnishes wings. I am that I am, light I am so bright, light I am that I am in the vanishing night. In the hand of the Lamb I am shining forever, in the land that I am. Wait a minute. In the hand of the Lamb I am shining forever, in the land that I am, crystal mist is my treasure. O swirling, spiraling whiteness of glory, I'm spinning and whirling in fiery forays. With the Om that I am one in God's plan, going forth now in bristling armor I stand. In victory's name that I am, all hail, for victory's claim that I am, all hail, for victory's flame that I am, all hail. I am that I am, I am that I am, I am that I am, all hail. All hail, I am that I am that I am, all hail, I am that I am that I am, all hail. There we go, marching out.
You'll probably be the only person that ever gives that decree. It's your unique mandala.
Good evening, Mother. Good evening, friends. This is a testimony to the power of the Word and to the grace of God in my life. A number of years, I was raised Catholic, and I was really disappointed in the Catholic Church when I was a teenager, and I left the church at that point, and for some reason I decided that I had to leave God as well, because the Catholic Church was the only church, and if I was going to forget about that, then I had to leave God too. So some years after that, I was going to a workshop, and I met a woman who was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we were talking one day. She was a wonderful friend, and she said, "Why don't you call to God?" And I had been telling her that my life was so empty, that, I had a good career, I had lots of friends, and everything materially was fine in my life, but I felt totally empty, and I had really no reason to live. And she said, "Well, you need God in your life." And I said, "Well, how do I don't even know if I believe in God." And she said, "Call to him." And I said, "Well, how?" And she said, "Well, just stand in the middle of your living room and just say, 'God, I'm here. Where are you?' Show me where you are." And I said, "Okay, I'll try it." It took some convincing, but I did do that. I set up an altar in my home, and a friend of mine had given me a beautiful statue of Kuan Yin from Hong Kong. And I always kept it on my mantle. So I thought, well, I didn't know it was Kuan Yin at the time. I thought, well, that looks holy, so I'll put that on my altar. And I got a candle, and I put it there, and I arranged some flowers and made it really beautiful. And then I stood in the center of the room, and I said, God, if you're there, I really need you. I have no other reason to live. And I need you in my life now. And you have 24 hours to answer. And then I thought that was really bold. And so I said, and if you don't answer, I promise you I'll spend the rest of my life looking for you. So God answered right away. And I had always been afraid of the dark. I had always been afraid to be outside after dark. And that day was summer solstice. And it turned dark, and I didn't even realize that it was dark. I was in my room, and I was reading. And I was so happy and so full of joy suddenly that I didn't even notice that it had turned dark, and I hadn't pulled down the blinds in my house, which was something I always had done before dark, so I would be safe, once the darkness came. So I saw that it was dark, and I felt so inspired to go out in the field and to pray to God. So I did. I took something with me. I probably took that statue with me and a few other things that I had, a beautiful crystal. And I went out and I drove over to the Stanford campus, which was near my home. And I set up this little altar out under the stars in a field. And I walked to it along a lake and went out in the field by myself. This is something I would never have done, a few hours earlier. And I just thanked God for responding so quickly to my call. And then after that, I went home, and after that, I decided I needed to go out in the mountains by myself. This is when there was still a retreat at Mount Shasta. And so I took a trip by myself into the mountains, and I spent a month out under the stars at Mount Shasta by myself, camping and communing with God. And during that time, I would go into meditations and sit on the rock in different places at Mount Shasta. And I started, when I would get to a really high meditation, I would notice that I would start singing songs. And I was singing songs about myself as the Christ child. And I was saying I am affirmations. I had never heard any I am affirmations in my life that I was aware of. And I certainly never thought of myself as a Christ child. And when I would sing those songs, they felt so right, and they touched my soul and my heart in such a deep way that when I would come out of the meditations, I couldn't remember the song or the melody that I had been singing, but I remember the words that I was the Christ child. And so I was on the mountain by myself for a month. I really had to ponder what that was, what that meant to me, to be the Christ child. And I realized that I needed to understand God in a way that was very different from the way I had been raised. So this somehow came to me during that time. God tutored me. I felt the presence of God with me as a feminine being, and like a mother figure with me and guiding me. And one day this beautiful voice came to me. I mean, it wasn't something I heard, but in my inner ear I heard this voice telling me to go for a walk at Mount Shasta. And so I was walking around, and then the voice said, well, look down. And I looked at the ground, and I was standing right before a design that had been made of rocks. And it was really beautiful. And I didn't know what the symbol was, but it was so beautiful to me that I copied it into a book. And that I always carried a book in my knapsack, and a blank book. And so I copied the design in there, and then I was encouraged to go on. I went on and I found another mandala of stones, and I copied down that design too. Now I knew what that one was, so it was like a peace symbol and some other symbols that Native Americans used. So when I got finished with this, at one point this voice told me to wash myself in the river, like baptizing myself. So there was a glacier-fed stream running through this place where I was at Mount Shasta, and I went into the river and poured water over my head, it was like symbolic of being reborn in God. And I was really touched by this experience. After this time on the mountain, I went home, and I asked a friend of mine who was a student of Buddhism, what was this symbol? She studied Buddhism and Hinduism in graduate school. And I said, what is this symbol? Or I just showed her. I said, look what I saw. And she said, oh, Olivia, that's an Om. And I thought, oh, isn't that wonderful? I didn't know what an Om was either. But she explained this all to me. And I was really touched that this was, that God would lead me to this. So the other thing that happened during that trip was that I realized that I could not have my heart closed to any one individual and still have my heart be loving. And I had cut off my relationship with my father many years before that because of various things. At the time, I didn't even really know why I was needing to be separate from him, but I've since then realized it and come to terms with it. But during that time on the mountain, I didn't really know, I wasn't thinking about it consciously, but at the end of that trip, I felt prompted to go back to the Bay Area in California, which is where I was living, and I also felt prompted to call my father and ask him if I could come see him. So I did that, and he was overjoyed, and we had a really wonderful meeting and reunion. And what I got from that was that I couldn't pretend to be a loving person and still separate myself from any part of life, and to hold and to say, oh yes, I love everybody except my father, was to really say that I couldn't love anyone, that my heart was totally closed. So during that time, I learned that I had to accept the pain, whatever it was, along with the goodness and the good times. And it was really a wonderful blessing. The second thing that happened was that another time I was deciding that I had to leave California for a time, and I went traveling, and I didn't really know where to go. And I sat by the side of a river in Utah, and I had gotten that far, and I really had no idea where to go from there. And I sat by the side of the river and just watched the sunlight dancing on the water, and watched the river streaming down and over the rocks. And I sat on a very large boulder near the edge of the river, and I said, God, I don't know where to go, but if you tell me where to go, I'll go there. And I sat, and then I said, I'm not going to leave till you tell me where to go. And a short time after that, it could have been an hour or something, I heard in my mind that you can go to Boulder, there are people of light there. But if you go to Sedona, you'll have family. And so I decided to go to Sedona in Arizona. And I drove into Sedona, and again, I got prompted to go to the post office. So I walked into the post office, and I was told to, this voice in my mind said to set up a post office box. So I did that. I went in and I said, I'd like to, get a post office box. I'm going to live here. And I filled out the card, and the woman looked at my name, the postmistress, and she said, oh, I have mail for you. And I said, no, you couldn't, I haven't been here before. I'm new in town. And she said, no, I have mail for you. So she came back with an envelope addressed to me, and I opened it, and it was from a former boss. And he said, I just had a feeling you might end up in Sedona, so I decided to send this to you. So it was confirmation to me that that was indeed the place I was supposed to be. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I wonder how I'll meet my family. And I walked out of the post office, and the first person I saw when I walked out the door was a very close friend of mine. And I said, Leo, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Alaska. And she said, well, a couple of weeks ago, I just got, I was praying and meditating, and I decided that I had to come to Sedona. So here I am. So through her, I met a very dear man who became a friend of mine. And the reason we became friends was he asked me what was my goal in life. And I said it was to get off the wheel of rebirth. And he said, "Oh, we've got to talk. I have some books for you." So they weren't our books, but they were the I Am books. And he shared the Magic Presence and Unveiled Mysteries with me. And it was through that I heard about Saint Germain, and I heard about the teachings in the Ascended Masters. And I prayed to Saint Germain for a year. Every day after that, he gave me a photograph of Saint Germain, and I placed it on my altar. And I prayed to Saint Germain to please send me, to the right place and bring me the teachings of the Ascended Masters. And it was not long after that, it was the end of a year after that I saw an ad in a newspaper in San Francisco for Mother's Stump on the West Coast in California. And I was so overjoyed when I saw her picture and I saw the chart and Jesus and Saint Germain. I knew that was it. I knew that was what I was looking for. And so I went to that. And the day that I went to that lecture, my boss at work came in and he brought me a rose. And he said, "You need this rose today." And it was Lotus's Ascension Day. And it was the day that I went to your first lecture in San Francisco. So, little did I think when I made that fiat to God that, if you're there, I need to know it, and I need to know it now. You have 24 hours. I can't imagine now saying something so bold to God, but I'm glad I did at that time because it's brought me here, and I'm grateful.
I'm glad you mentioned that because in the last 4 or 5 days, I feel the tremendously powerful prompting from El Moria that we should say the words, "Command ye me." And even though that's not in the right point of from ourself to God, it's from God to us. God is saying, "Command me." That's what the "Command ye me" statement is. And I think we should use those very words. Command me to do whatever you want me to do for you. Command ye me. I have to have the command. I'll do it for you instantaneously. And I'd like us all to get in that habit of hearing God's voice. Command ye me. I'm just here waiting for you to command me. So then what is the realization? The realization is that God in El Moria is placing himself before us as our servant. He has come to serve us. So he says, "Command me, and whatever you say that is the will of God in keeping with his laws, I will do it." And I personally think that right now, this very minute, and for numbers of years to come through this dark period, that we have to be saying this mantra constantly and not feeling in any way that it is debasing God. God is waiting for our decree to do whatever. So let's make that a point when we stand and we do our fiats. Just command ye me, and then name the masters that you are commanding. Name every name of every master you can even think of, and give them a command, and they and millions of their legions will go right out and fulfill that command. And when you have this ultimate fiery conviction that this call compels the answer, and that God is there for you, I believe that we, the light bearers and many devout souls on planet Earth, will change the world. Because it's like the masters can't get in. They can't get into this octave without us opening the door and receiving them. Please don't forget this. And I'm glad you did that. You were in the right spirit when you did that. Did you want to give us this? Go ahead.
Okay, so this dictation was given on July 2nd, 1995 by Rio Light. Know that fear is a disease that must be cast out, as else it becomes a cancer. Therefore, what do you do when you have at your disposal a sword of white fire sheathed in emerald light? Well, you go forth with our legions. You go forth and become a part of all of the legions on the 4th and the 5th rays. And then you realize how much need there is in the earth for the protection of life and for the binding of the enemies of mankind. We then prepare you and we offer you training in our angelic bands to become part of us, to meet where we meet. And we shall take you there, but not tell you where it is. On the outer, we have a very large retreat where we train those in the mode of fearlessness. Fear must be cast out by you, out of every cell and organ. This means the purification and the balancing of the vessels of being, the four lower bodies, the vessels of the mind. And we shall take you in spring and summer training. We will take you and show you the places in the earth where there are openings into the pits of death and hell. We will show you how we descend fully clothed in this armor of white fire and emerald sheath. We will show you how we tackle these demons. So we send forth a very great call, and we say, join us, for in this hour our focus is on the little children and youth and those who are moving into maturity, where they shall bear upon their shoulders, yes, the weight of their generation and their nations. This is the hour, beloved. We will meet you then nightly at the retreat of the Divine Mother over this ranch, and we will go out together, and you will receive a training that you have not had for thousands of years as you work with angels. We look forward to this, and we welcome you in the ranks of our service, for we know that you feel limited. What can we do is always the question. Well, we will show you what you can do, and therefore we say, let us go forth with a thrust and a ho, ho, ho. For this is the action that Saint Germain and K17 and Lanello have been waiting for, and the dispensation, beloved, has finally come. That's the end of the quote.
Thank you. I would like to conclude this session by asking you to stand and give your commands to all the ascended masters and hosts of the lords that you know. Let us sing to Beloved El Moria, Pomp and Circumstance. Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and the Divine Mother, I seal you in the diamond heart.